The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Warp fields bend space according to precise equations. Matter and antimatter annihilate in predictable reactions. Even the seemingly chaotic nature of subspace follows patterns that can be mapped, analyzed, and ultimately controlled. But what happens when something appears that operates on entirely different universal constants? When a civilization built on the physics of another reality emerges into ours, the question isn't just who they are, but whether the very fabric of space can contain them. If you want to see more civilizations collide in the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a species you'd want to see meet the Federation in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The Vulcan Science Academy's orbital sensor array detected the anomaly at 0347 hours, Vulcan Standard Time. Master Plaque, senior astrophysicist on the night observation shift, observed the readings with characteristic Vulcan composure even as the data streaming across her console defied every established model of subspace physics. Impossible, she murmured, then immediately corrected herself. Improbable. All phenomena have explanations. The subspace corridor, if it could be called that, was tearing itself apart 300,000 kilometers above Vulcan's northern hemisphere. Unlike the stable wormholes documented by deep space explorers, this rift pulsed with energies that registered simultaneously across 17 different subspace domains. The quantum signature suggested dimensional displacement on a scale that shouldn't exist outside theoretical mathematics. Then something emerged. The vessel measured approximately 300 meters in length, its design unlike anything in the Vulcan database. Where Vulcan ships favored elegant rings and swept nacelles, this craft resembled an elongated teardrop of metallic gray, its surface smooth and featureless except for subtle geometric patterns that seemed to shift when observed directly. No visible propulsion system. No warp nacelles. No obvious weapons ports. But the power readings, those were unmistakable. Plaque's fingers moved across her console with practiced efficiency. This is Vulcan Science Academy to High Command. Unknown vessel has emerged from subspace anomaly in high orbit. Configuration unknown. Power signature exceeds Vulcan cruiser capacity by factor of 12. The response came within seconds. Administrator Vlas himself. Maintain sensor lock. Defense perimeter is being established. Do not attempt communication until armed response is in position. Inside the vessel designated O'Neill by its creators, Supreme Commander Thor of the Asgard fleet stood before a holographic display showing sensor data that made no sense. The small gray figure, barely a meter tall with an enlarged cranium and large black eyes, had commanded Asgard vessels for over 200 years. He had negotiated with the Gold, fought the Replicators, and protected countless civilizations across the Ida galaxy. But this situation was unprecedented. Report, Thor commanded, his voice carrying the characteristic monotone of Asgard's speech. Hermiad, the O'Neill's senior scientist, manipulated controls with elongated fingers. We are no longer in our universe, Commander. The subspace corridor collapsed during our investigation of the temporal anomaly. Quantum signatures indicate dimensional displacement. We have emerged in what appears to be a parallel reality with different fundamental constants. Specifics. Hyperspace does not exist here. The subspace layers follow different mathematical models. Our hyperspace drive is non-functional. Beaming technology operational but consuming 37% more power than standard. Shields holding but compensating for unfamiliar energy interactions. Hermiad paused, which for an Asgard indicated significant concern. Commander, preliminary genetic analysis indicates our cloning degradation is accelerating in this environment. We estimate 30% faster deterioration than in our native universe. Thor absorbed this information without visible reaction. The Asgard had faced extinction before. They would face it logically. Sensors detect multiple vessels approaching. Configuration? Ring-shaped primary hull with two nacelles. Primitive matter-antimatter propulsion system. Estimated technological level approximately equivalent to Earth's circa 2151 by our timeline. However, Hermiad's large eyes widened slightly. Life sign analysis indicates a fascinating anomaly. The approaching vessels are crewed by a species with remarkable similarity to Vulcans from our database. Vulcans are a species from the Alteran database, extinct in our galaxy for millions of years. Precisely. Yet here they thrive. Commander, I recommend extreme caution. We may have encountered a civilization that evolved along similar lines to the ancients. Thor considered this. The Asgard had always respected the legacy of the ancients. The Alterans who had built the Stargate network before ascending. To encounter a species that shared their genetic markers, even distantly, deserved respect. Open a channel. Standard first contact protocols. 3 Vulcan DK-Wire-class cruisers formed a triangle formation around the alien vessel, weapons powered but not locked. On the bridge of the lead cruiser, Captain Solon maintained the emotionless expression expected of a Vulcan commander even as his tactical officer reported readings that challenged his understanding of physics. Their shields operate on principles inconsistent with known technology, the tactical officer stated. Energy dispersal patterns suggest multiphasic harmonics. Weapon systems are detected but not activated. Power core. Captain, their power generation exceeds our entire battle group by an order of magnitude. Maintain position. Logic dictates that a species capable of such technology would have destroyed us already if hostile intent existed. The communication console chirped. Captain, we are receiving a transmission. Audio only. The universal translator is functional. Highly efficient linguistic analysis. On speaker. The voice that emerged was unlike any Solon had encountered. Monotone, precise, carrying in weight of ancient authority. I am Supreme Commander Thor of the Asgard vessel O'Neill. We intend no hostile action. Our presence in your space is the result of unforeseen dimensional displacement. We request diplomatic communication to establish mutual understanding and determine a path toward resolution. Solon raised an eyebrow. The only outward sign of his surprise. The message demonstrated sophisticated linguistic adaptation, diplomatic protocol awareness, and most significantly, an absence of aggression despite overwhelming technological superiority. This is Captain Solon of the Vulcan High Command Cruiser Plana. Your vessel represents unknown technology in Vulcan sovereign space. Standard protocol requires inspection and verification of your stated intentions. Will you permit an away team to board your vessel? There was a pause of precisely 3 seconds. We will permit 2 representatives. We will simultaneously transport 2 Asgard representatives to your vessel. This demonstrates mutual trust and facilitates efficient information exchange. Transport? Solon's tactical officer immediately accessed the sensor logs. Captain, during our scan, we detected brief energy signatures consistent with matter transportation, but the technology is far more sophisticated than our own transporter prototypes. They could have beamed weapons or hostile forces aboard any of our vessels at any time, which meant they chose not to. Logic and restraint from a position of strength. Solon found himself intrigued. Agreed, Commander Thor. Coordinates are being transmitted. We await your arrival. On the O'Neill, Thor turned to Hermiad. Prepare for transport. We will meet this civilization and determine if they can be trusted. And perhaps, if their genetic diversity can provide insight into our own degradation crisis. An optimistic projection, Commander. Optimism is illogical. This is merely statistical analysis of potential outcomes. We require allies in this universe. The Vulcans demonstrate technological capability and, more importantly, logical restraint. They are a suitable first contact. The beaming process engaged, and 2 Asgard figures dissolved into white light. Above Vulcan, 2 ancient civilizations were about to meet. Neither yet understood how profoundly they would change each other. The Vulcan cruiser Plan S transporter bay materialized two figures that immediately challenged every assumption about alien biology. Captain Solon and Science Officer Tmur stood at attention as the white light coalesced into forms barely a meter tall, gray skin, disproportionately large heads, enormous black eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The beings wore simple gray uniforms without ornamentation, yet they carried themselves with unmistakable authority. "I am Supreme Commander Thor," the slightly taller figure stated. "This is Hermiad, Senior Scientist of the O'Neill. We come in peace and seek mutual understanding." Tmur's tricorder was already active, scanning with Vulcan efficiency. "Fascinating. Genetic structure indicates evolutionary age far exceeding Vulcan development. DNA analysis suggests deliberate manipulation. Extensive cloning markers throughout cellular structure." Thor's large eyes fixed on the tricorder. "Your scanning technology is primitive but demonstrates sound theoretical principles. Yes, the Asgard have relied on cloning for reproduction for thousands of years. It is both our greatest achievement and our most significant failure." Solon gestured toward the corridor. "Administrator Vlas awaits in the conference chamber. He leads the Vulcan High Command and will determine how we proceed." He paused, observing the Asgard with scientific curiosity masked by diplomatic neutrality. "Your technology is considerably advanced beyond our own. Yet you request negotiation rather than demand compliance. This demonstrates either wisdom or strategic calculation." "Both," Thor replied as they walked through corridors lined with Vulcan crew members who maintained perfect composure despite their evident curiosity. "The Asgard have served as protectors of younger civilizations in our galaxy for millennia. We have learned that technology without wisdom leads to extinction. We have also learned that every species, regardless of technological level, possesses unique value. A logical philosophy," Tmur observed. "Though I note you describe yourselves as protectors. This implies a hierarchical view of civilization development." Hermiad spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a slight variation in tone that suggested intellectual engagement. "An astute observation. Yes, the Asgard acknowledge our technological superiority. However, we have also witnessed civilizations we once protected surpass us in unexpected ways. The humans of our galaxy, for instance, demonstrate problem-solving capabilities that often exceed our own despite centuries of technological disadvantage." Solon's eyebrow rose fractionally. "You protect humans?" "Protected," Thor corrected. Past tense. "The humans of our galaxy, particularly those of the Tauri, or Earth, have evolved beyond requiring our protection. In many ways, they have become our equals. Perhaps even our superiors in adaptability and creative thinking." The conference chamber's doors slid open, revealing a space designed for logic and efficiency. A long table of polished stone, view screens displaying tactical data, and at the head of the table, Administrator Vlas, a Vulcan whose age showed in the distinguished gray at his temples and the calculating intensity of his gaze. "Supreme Commander Thor." Vlas stood, offering the traditional Vulcan salute. "Live long and prosper. I am Administrator Vlas of the Vulcan High Command. Your arrival has created significant questions." Thor returned the gesture with his elongated fingers. "Peace and long life, Administrator. I understand your concern. We are as surprised by our presence here as you are." They sat, and for a moment, two ancient civilizations studied each other across the table. Vlas spoke first, his tone carrying the weight of authority. "Our scientists have analyzed the subspace anomaly that preceded your arrival. The energy discharge was detectable across 3 sectors. Similar phenomena have been observed recently, disturbances in the timeline itself. We have reason to believe a temporal Cold War is being waged by factions from various futures." Thor's expression remained neutral, but Hermiad leaned forward slightly. "Temporal manipulation. The Asgard have strict protocols against such technology. Time travel inevitably creates paradoxes that threaten causality itself." "Agreed," Vlas said. "Yet we believe your arrival may be connected to these temporal disturbances. Whether you are a weapon, a diversion, or an unintended consequence remains to be determined. We are none of those, Thor stated. We are explorers investigating an anomaly in our own space when we were displaced dimensionally. However, your suspicion is logical given the circumstances. What would satisfy your requirements for verification? Vlas steepled his fingers. Complete technical specifications of your vessel. Full disclosure of your capabilities and intentions. Submission to Vulcan oversight while you remain in our space. And most critically, an explanation for why a species with technology centuries beyond our own would willingly accept such restrictions. The silence stretched for precisely 5 seconds. No, Thor said simply. Tmur's tricorder nearly slipped from her fingers. Salen's eyes widened fractionally. Vlas's expression hardened. You refuse? Vlas's tone carried a dangerous edge. You are in Vulcan sovereign space with a single vessel against our entire defense fleet. Logic dictates cooperation. Logic dictates mutual respect, Thor countered. The Asgard do not submit to oversight. We also do not conquer or dominate. We propose an alternative, a scientific and cultural exchange based on equality, not subordination. We share information about our displacement. You share information about this temporal conflict. We work together to resolve both situations. Equality? Vlas stood, his controlled anger barely masked by Vulcan discipline. Your vessel could destroy our entire battle group. Your technology operates on principles we cannot comprehend. There is no equality here. Hermiad interjected, his tone academic. Administrator, I have been scanning your civilization's information networks, with apologies for the intrusion. Your people value logic above all else. Consider this logically, if we intended conquest, you would already be conquered. If we intended exploitation, we would take what we needed. Instead, we sit across a table, negotiating as equals because we choose to recognize you as such. Technology does not determine worth. The Asgard learned this lesson painfully over millennia. Vlas sat slowly, his mind clearly working through the implications. You scan our networks and call it a demonstration of peaceful intent? I call it evidence of capability restrained by choice. Hermiad replied. The Asgard could have accessed every database, disabled every weapon, transported every Vulcan into holding cells. We did none of these things. We knocked on your door and waited for you to answer. Is this not the behavior of those seeking cooperation? Tmur spoke quietly. Administrator, their logic is sound. They demonstrate power through restraint rather than application. This is highly sophisticated diplomacy. Vlas regarded the Asgard with new assessment. Very well. We will proceed with information exchange on equal terms. But know this, Commander Thor, Vulcan has survived for millennia through cautious logic. We do not extend trust easily. Nor should you. Thor agreed. Trust is earned through consistent action, not granted through words. We will demonstrate our intentions through cooperation. In exchange, we ask for your assistance in understanding this universe's physical laws. Our technology is failing because the fundamental constants here differ from our own reality. Fascinating, Tmur murmured, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. You're experiencing dimensional incompatibility at the quantum level. Precisely. And our genetic degradation is accelerating in this environment. We require extensive research to adapt our technology and biological systems to function optimally here. Vlas considered this. A technologically superior species with critical vulnerabilities. The balance of power was more complex than initial assessments suggested. I will consult with the Science Directorate. In the meantime, you will remain in orbit under observation. Any aggressive action will be met with. Understood. Thor interrupted gently. We await your decision, Administrator. As the Asgard prepared to transport back to their vessel, Tmur approached Thor. Commander, a question if I may. You mentioned humans surpassing you in certain capabilities. What specifically did they possess that the Asgard lacked? Thor's large eyes met hers. Hope, science officer. When we faced extinction, we calculated probabilities and accepted our fate. The humans refused to accept any fate they hadn't chosen. Sometimes illogical optimism achieves what cold logic cannot. The Asgard dissolved into white light, leaving the Vulcans to contemplate a civilization that had mastered the stars yet still searched for something they'd lost. 300,000 kilometers from Vulcan, the NX-01 Enterprise dropped out of warp with a shudder that rattled the young starship's superstructure. Captain Jonathan Archer gripped his command chair as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. "Sorry, Captain," Commander Charles Trip Tucker called from engineering. "Still working out the bugs in the Warp 5 engine. She's not as smooth as I'd like. Just get me a stable orbit, Trip." Archer turned to his communications officer. "Hoshi, any response from the Vulcans?" Ensign Hoshi Sato shook her head, her expression troubled. "Nothing, sir. They acknowledged our arrival but refused to explain the situation. They just said to maintain position and await instructions." Sub-Commander T'Pol emerged from her science station, moving with characteristic Vulcan grace to stand beside Archer's chair. "Captain, I have been monitoring subspace communications. The Vulcan High Command has gone to tactical alert. 3 cruisers are in formation around an unidentified vessel in high orbit." Unidentified? The Vulcans know every ship in this sector. Not this one. T'Pol called up sensor data on the main view screen. Configuration unknown. Power signatures exceed anything in our database. The Vulcans are treating this as a potential threat. Archer studied the alien vessel, sleek, gray, utterly unfamiliar. Or a first contact situation they want to control themselves. He'd seen this before. The Vulcan High Command had a habit of keeping humanity at arm's length, deciding what information Earth was ready for. "Hoshi, open a channel to Administrator Vlas." "Sir, the Vulcans were very clear." "I heard what they said, Ensign." "Open the channel." Vlas's face appeared on screen, his expression carrying barely suppressed irritation. "Captain Archer, I instructed you to maintain position." "With respect, Administrator, we're here investigating the same subspace anomaly that brought that ship to Vulcan. Starfleet has a right to know what we're dealing with. This is a Vulcan matter. A subspace rift that size affected navigation across 3 sectors." Archer interrupted. "That makes it everybody's matter. Now, are you going to brief us, or do I need to have my science officer scan that vessel herself?" Vlas's jaw tightened. "Very well. Join me in the conference chamber aboard the T'Plana. Come alone." "Not alone. T'Pol comes with me." "Sub-Commander T'Pol serves aboard your vessel by assignment of the High Command. She will receive briefing through proper channels. She's my science officer, and she's coming." Archer out. He cut the transmission before Vlas could respond. "T'Pol, you're with me. Trip, you have the bridge." "Captain," T'Pol said quietly, "deliberately antagonizing the Administrator may not be strategically wise." "Probably not. But I'm tired of the Vulcans treating us like children who can't handle the truth." He headed for the turbolift. "Besides, you're the most qualified person to analyze whatever's on that ship. If Vlas doesn't like it, he can file a complaint with Starfleet Command." 15 minutes later, Archer and T'Pol materialized aboard the T'Plana to find Vlas waiting with poorly concealed annoyance. "Captain, your insistence on protocol violations is noted. So is your habit of keeping information from Earth," Archer replied pleasantly. "Now, what are we dealing with?" Vlas led them to the conference chamber. "They call themselves the Asgard. Technologically advanced beyond our current assessment capabilities. They claim to have been displaced from another universe entirely through the subspace anomaly." "Another universe?" Archer exchanged glances with T'Pol. "You're saying this is dimensional travel, not just spatial displacement?" "Their explanation aligns with theoretical models," T'Pol confirmed, studying data on a pad. "Commander, these power readings are extraordinary. Their shield harmonics alone suggest engineering principles we haven't discovered. The doors opened. Two small gray figures entered, and Archer felt his breath catch. He'd seen classified files, heard rumors of Roswell, listened to his father's whispered stories. But nothing prepared him for meeting them face to face. Captain Jonathan Archer of the Earth's Starship Enterprise, Vlas said formally. This is Supreme Commander Thor and Hermiot of the Asgard. Thor's enormous black eyes studied Archer with unsettling intensity. Captain Archer, it is unexpected to meet humans in this universe. You know humans? Archer asked, fascinated. In our reality, yes. The Tauri, humans of Earth, are allies and friends of the Asgard. We have protected their world for generations, though recently they have grown to require our protection less and less. Thor's head tilted slightly. You resemble them physically, but your technology is considerably less advanced. Approximately 200 years less developed than the Tauri at equivalent chronological period. We're a young space-faring civilization, Archer acknowledged. Still learning, still exploring. The Vulcans have been helpful in that process. Paul's eyebrow rose at his diplomatic phrasing. Hermiot stepped forward, his tricorder-like device scanning. Fascinating. Your genetic markers align perfectly with Tauri baseline. This confirms our dimensional displacement rather than temporal. We are in a parallel universe where human development followed a similar but distinct path. Commander Thor, T'Pol interjected. Your technology operates on principles unfamiliar to our physics. Yet you claim dimensional incompatibility is degrading your systems. This suggests your universe operates under different fundamental constants. Precisely, Sub-Commander. We require extensive research to adapt our technology to this reality's quantum framework. The Asgard have proposed a scientific exchange with Vulcan to facilitate this adaptation. Vlas cleared his throat. An exchange that remains under negotiation. Captain Archer, you have been briefed. You may return to your vessel. Actually, Thor said, I wish to speak with Captain Archer further. In our universe, humans demonstrated unique problem-solving capabilities that often exceeded Asgard analytical methods. I am curious whether this universe's humans share similar attributes. Archer grinned despite himself. Administrator, I think the Asgard just asked for a second opinion. Vlas's expression could have frozen the desert. The High Command will determine. With respect, Administrator, Thor interrupted gently. The Asgard negotiate with those we choose. We have spoken with Vulcan authority. Now we wish to speak with human authority. Unless Vulcan claims dominion over Earth's foreign policy? The silence was deafening. Earth is an independent world, Vlas said stiffly. They may conduct their own negotiations. Excellent, Thor replied. Captain Archer, would you permit an Asgard delegation to visit your vessel? I believe we have much to discuss. Archer looked at the small gray figure who just outmaneuvered the Vulcan High Command with flawless logic and felt a surge of respect. Commander Thor, it would be my honor. The mess hall of Enterprise had never hosted visitors quite like these. Thor and Hermiot sat across from Archer, T'Pol, and Trip Tucker, their small forms barely visible above the table's edge. Chef had offered refreshments, politely declined by the Asgard, leaving only the hum of the ship's systems to fill occasional silences. Trip couldn't stop staring. So, you're saying your whole species reproduces through cloning? No natural birth at all? Correct, Commander Tucker, Hermiot replied. Approximately 11,000 years ago, the Asgard achieved technological transcendence over biological reproduction. We believed we had conquered mortality itself through cellular manipulation and consciousness transfer. Believed? T'Pol asked. Thor's expression, difficult to read on features so alien, seemed to carry weight. We were wrong. Each cloning iteration introduces microscopic genetic degradation. Over millennia, these errors compound. Our DNA is collapsing, Sub-Commander. The Asgard face extinction not from war or disease, but from our own hubris in believing we could improve upon natural evolution. The table fell silent. Archer leaned forward. How long do you have? In our universe? Decades, perhaps a century if we're fortunate. But here. Thor paused. Hermia detected something disturbing during our initial scans. Our genetic degradation is accelerating in this reality at approximately 30% above normal rates. We theorize the different quantum constants are incompatible with our artificially stabilized DNA structure. That's why you need help, Archer said quietly. You're not just stranded. You're dying faster here. An accurate assessment, Captain? Thor's large eyes held something that might have been respect. The Vulcans offer scientific resources and facilities. But they also offer restrictions, oversight, and a hierarchical relationship we find troubling. We have been protectors for so long, we struggle with accepting subordinate status. Trip scratched his head. So why come to us? No offense, Commander, but our technology is 200 years behind the Vulcans. We're barely past Warp 5. What can we possibly offer you? Hermia answered, his tone carrying academic precision. In our universe, the Tauri possessed something the Asgard had lost, the ability to think beyond established parameters. When we calculated probabilities and concluded situations were unsolvable, they found solutions we never considered. They challenged our assumptions. They took risks we deemed illogical. They had hope. Thor added. Irrational, statistically improbable hope that refused to accept predetermined outcomes. It saved them. It saved us. I wish to know if this universe's humans share that quality. Archer smiled slightly. Commander, humans have been proving the odds wrong since we climbed down from the trees. The Vulcans told us we weren't ready for Warp 5. They said deep space exploration would kill us. They've spent 50 years telling us to slow down, be cautious, wait until we're ready. He met Thor's alien gaze. We stopped listening and built this ship anyway. Fascinating, Hermia murmured. Identical psychological profiles across dimensional boundaries. The human tendency toward optimistic defiance appears to be a universal constant. T'Pol's expression was carefully neutral. Captain, while your enthusiasm is noted, the Asgard face a genuine scientific crisis. Hope alone will not repair degraded DNA. No, Thor agreed. But perspective might. The Asgard have been attempting to solve our genetic crisis using Asgard methodologies for centuries. We have failed repeatedly. Perhaps we require fresh analysis from minds that approach problems differently. Trip leaned forward, engineer's curiosity overcoming his awe. Commander, could I ask about your cloning technology? The cellular replication patterns, the consciousness transfer mechanism. How do you maintain continuity of self across iterations? An excellent question. Hermia pulled out a small device, projecting a holographic display of Asgard DNA that rotated above the table. The process involves quantum state mapping of neural pathways combined with cellular template restoration. However, observe these degradation markers. As Hermia and Trip dove into technical discussion, Archer noticed Thor studying him with that unnerving, unblinking gaze. You have questions, Captain? Several, Archer admitted. But the main one is, why are you really here? Not on Enterprise, I mean. Why investigate that subspace anomaly in the first place? The Asgard don't strike me as the type to chase scientific curiosities without good reason. Thor was silent for a moment. Perceptive. We detected temporal distortion signatures similar to those described by Administrator Vlas. In our universe, temporal manipulation is forbidden by galactic treaty after several civilizations nearly destroyed themselves attempting to alter their pasts. We investigated because we suspected someone was violating those accords. And you got pulled through instead. The anomaly was a trap, Thor said quietly. Not for us specifically, but for anyone investigating. We believe someone is attempting to destabilize multiple timelines simultaneously. Our displacement may have been collateral damage. T'Pol straightened. Commander, this temporal Cold War the Administrator mentioned, participants from various futures manipulating the past. If your displacement is connected, you may have been targeted deliberately. We considered that possibility. A technologically superior species appearing in Earth's past could alter the timeline significantly. The question is whether our arrival serves someone's agenda or disrupts it. Archer felt a chill. You're saying we might be pawns in someone else's game. Perhaps. Or perhaps our arrival is an opportunity to disrupt that game entirely. Thor's tone carried something that might have been determination. Captain, the Asgard have resources the Vulcans cannot provide. Advanced sensors that can detect temporal manipulation. Weapons that could defend against future technology. Scientific knowledge that could accelerate Earth's development by centuries. In exchange for what? Honesty. Cooperation. And most importantly, help solving a problem we cannot solve alone. Our genetic crisis requires new thinking. The Vulcans offer logic and facilities. You offer something more valuable. You offer a different perspective. Trip looked up from the holographic DNA strand. Captain, this is incredible. They're cloning technology if we could adapt it. We're not looking for technology handouts, Trip, Archer said firmly, then looked at Thor. But we are willing to help. That's what Starfleet does. We explore, we seek out new life, and when we find someone in trouble, we don't calculate the odds, we figure out how to help anyway. Thor's alien features remained inscrutable, but his tone carried unmistakable warmth. You are very much like the Tauri I know, Captain Archer. Very much indeed. Is that a compliment? The highest the Asgard can offer. Outside the mess hall's viewport, Vulcan hung in space. A world of logic observing humanity's first steps toward an alliance that would change everything. The Andorian Imperial Guard warship Doctrine emerged from warp at the edge of Vulcan space with weapons powered and shields at maximum. Commander Thylek Shran stood on the bridge, antennae twitching with barely contained aggression as he studied the tactical display. 3 Vulcan cruisers in defensive formation, his tactical officer reported. Unknown vessel in high orbit. And the human ship Enterprise maintaining position 200,000 kilometers out. Of course Archer's here, Shran muttered. The pink skin can't resist sticking his nose into anything interesting. His antennae curved forward with predatory interest. What about this unknown vessel? Specifications? Readings are inconsistent, Commander. Power output exceeds our scanning capacity. Configuration matches nothing in Imperial databases. The Vulcans appear to be negotiating rather than engaging. Shran's blue skin darkened slightly. The Andorian equivalent of a raised eyebrow. The Vulcans negotiate from a position of weakness? This I must see. He touched his communications console. Hail the Enterprise. Let's find out what our friend Captain Archer has gotten himself into this time. Jonathan Archer's face appeared on screen, and Shran saw the human's expression shift from wariness to cautious friendliness. Commander Shran. This is unexpected. Jonathan! Always a pleasure. Shran's tone carried its usual mixture of mockery and genuine respect. I happened to be in the neighborhood when Andorian intelligence detected a subspace anomaly large enough to rattle sensors across 3 sectors. Imagine my surprise to find Vulcan cruisers, your ship, and an unknown vessel all playing nice together. What's the occasion? Someone finally convinced the Vulcans to share their toys. It's complicated, Shran. It always is with you. Permission to come aboard? I promise not to steal anything important. Archer glanced off screen, probably at T'Pol, then nodded. Granted. But Shran, this situation requires diplomacy, not Andorian bravado. I'm wounded, Jonathan. I'm a model of diplomatic restraint. Shran's antennae curved with amusement. I'll be there shortly. Shran out. 20 minutes later, Shran materialized in Enterprise's transporter room and immediately noticed the heightened security. 4 armed Makos instead of the usual 2. The Andorian commander's warrior instincts immediately catalogued threat assessments and tactical positions. 4 guards for little old me? Shran asked as Archer approached. I'm flattered, They're not for you, Archer said. We have unusual guests aboard. This way. As they walked through Enterprise's corridors, Shran's antennae constantly moved, sampling the air and electromagnetic fields. I'm detecting technology that doesn't match Vulcan or human specifications. Energy signatures I've never encountered. Who exactly are these guests, Jonathan? See for yourself. The mess hall doors opened. Shran stepped through and stopped dead. His antennae shot rigidly upward, the Andorian expression of complete shock. Two small gray beings sat at the table with Commander Tucker, examining holographic displays of complex genetic structures. By Yuzavea's eyes. Shran breathed. Jonathan, are those Asgard? Archer confirmed. Commander Thylek Shran of the Andorian Imperial Guard, meet Supreme Commander Thor and Hermiot of the Asgard fleet. Thor stood, barely reaching Shran's chest despite the Andorian's own modest height. Commander Shran. We have heard much about the Andorian people from Captain Archer. Your reputation as warriors and strategists precedes you. Shran's antennae curved forward in aggressive assessment. You've heard about us. How? We've never encountered your species before. In our universe, records of many species exist in ancient databases maintained by a civilization called the Ancients. The Andorians were among those documented, though your empire fell millennia before our time in that reality. Fell? Shran's hand moved unconsciously toward his Ushantor blade. You're saying the Andorian Empire is extinct in your universe? All organic civilizations eventually end, Commander. Hermiot said with clinical detachment. Time is the ultimate adversary. The Andorians, humans, Vulcans, all rose and fell in our galaxy's distant past. Shran's blue skin flushed darker with anger. I don't like your tone, scientist. Or your implications. Then perhaps you'll prefer my alternative proposition. Thor interjected smoothly. Sit, Commander. Let us discuss not the past of our universe but the future of yours. Shran remained standing for a long moment, then slowly sat, antennae still curved aggressively forward. I'm listening. The Vulcans have offered the Asgard sanctuary and scientific cooperation. Thor began. In exchange for technological and cultural exchange. However, the High Command's terms include restrictions and oversight we find limiting. Of course they do, Shran said with satisfaction. The Vulcans believe they're the only logical species in the galaxy. Everyone else is just a child needing guidance. An attitude we find counterproductive. Hermiot added. The Asgard prefer partnerships of equals, not hierarchical relationships. Shran's antennae curved with interest. And you're telling me this because the Andorian Empire represents an alternative, Thor said. Military strength. Strategic thinking. A culture that values honor and directness over political maneuvering. These are qualities the Asgard respect. You want an alliance with Andoria. Shran leaned back, antennae rotating as he processed this. To counterbalance Vulcan influence. We want options, Commander. The Asgard have learned that depending on a single ally creates vulnerabilities. Archer shifted uncomfortably. Thor, I thought we were working together on this. We are, Captain. But surely you understand that the Asgard must consider all diplomatic possibilities. Your human concept of not putting all eggs in one basket applies. Shran laughed, a sharp, barking sound. I like you, Commander Thor. You think like a strategist, not a scientist. The Andorian Imperial Guard would welcome an alliance with a species of your capabilities. He leaned forward. But I have to ask. What's the catch? Nobody offers advanced technology without wanting something in return. Genetic research assistance? Hermiot said bluntly. The Asgard face extinction from cloning degradation. We require diverse genetic samples and fresh scientific perspectives. The Andorians possess unique DNA structure adapted to harsh environmental conditions. Your genetic diversity could provide valuable research data. You want to experiment on Andorians? Shran's hand was on his blade instantly. No, Thor said firmly. We want to study Andorian genetics with full consent and cooperation. No forced samples. No unwilling subjects. Complete transparency in our research. In exchange, we offer defensive technology and strategic intelligence that could shift the balance of power in this region of space. Shran's antennae curved thoughtfully. Defensive technology. Enough to match Vulcan capabilities? Exceed them, Commander. The Andorian was quiet for a long moment. I'll need to consult with the Imperial Guard. This isn't a decision I can make alone. He stood. But personally, I think the Vulcans have enjoyed their technological superiority long enough. It's time other species had a say in galactic affairs. Thor nodded. A sentiment we share, Commander Shran. As the Andorian departed, Archer turned to Thor with concern. You're playing a dangerous game. The Vulcans won't appreciate you negotiating with their rivals. The Vulcans do not control Asgard diplomacy, Captain. We negotiate with whom we choose. Thor's large eyes met Archer's. Besides, healthy competition often produces superior outcomes. Would you not agree? Archer couldn't quite suppress a smile. Commander, you're going to fit right in around here. The Corridan system hung at the edge of explored space, its third planet a blue-green jewel struggling beneath the weight of ecological collapse. In the O'Neill's science lab, Hermiad studied sensor data with growing concern while Thor stood silently beside him, processing information with the rapid efficiency of an Asgard mind. The volcanic activity has increased 37% in the past solar year, Hermiad reported. Atmospheric particulate density is approaching catastrophic levels. If current trends continue, Corridan 3 will experience mass extinction within 18 months. Thor examined holographic projections of the planet's tectonic structure. Cause? Natural geological cycle exacerbated by primitive industrial activity. The Corridanites discovered basic metallurgy approximately 200 years ago. Their mining operations inadvertently destabilized already stressed fault lines. Hermiad manipulated the display, highlighting seismic pressure points. They possess neither the technology nor the scientific knowledge to prevent what is coming. Population? Approximately 400 million sentient beings. Pre-warp civilization. No knowledge of life beyond their world. Hermiad paused. Commander, we could stabilize their planetary core in 6 days using our technology. Deploy seismic regulators at key tectonic junctures. The Corridanites would never know we intervened. Thor was silent for a long moment. Contact Captain Archer. And inform Administrator Vlas that we request immediate diplomatic consultation. This matter requires discussion before action. 2 hours later, the conference chamber aboard the T'Plana hosted an unusual assembly. Vlas sat at the head of the table, flanked by Vulcan science advisors. Archer and T'Pol represented humanity. Commander Shran attended via subspace link from the Docana. And Thor stood before a holographic display of Corridan 3, presenting data that condemned an entire world. The situation is clear, Thor concluded. Without intervention, the Corridanite civilization faces extinction. The Asgard possessed the capability to prevent this outcome with minimal effort and zero cultural contamination. We could save 400 million lives. Vlas's expression remained neutral, but his tone carried absolute certainty. And in doing so, violate every principle of non-interference that guides interstellar relations. The Corridanites are pre-warp. First contact protocols explicitly forbid intervention in their natural development. Natural development? Thor's voice carried an edge rarely heard from Asgard. Administrator, their planet is dying. This is not cultural evolution, this is geological catastrophe. A catastrophe their own industrial activity contributed to. Vlas countered. To intervene now would be to shield them from the consequences of their choices. How will they learn restraint if superior beings rescue them from every crisis? Shran's image leaned forward on the view screen. The Vulcan speaks wisdom for once. No offense, Commander Thor, but swooping in to save primitive species creates dependency. They'll never develop if you keep solving their problems. So we let them die. Archer's voice was tight with controlled anger. 400 million people, Shran. Children. Families. An entire civilization wiped out because we're too concerned about philosophical principles to lift a finger? T'Pol spoke carefully. Captain, the Prime Directive, though not yet formally codified, exists for logical reasons. Species that develop with external interference often experience cultural contamination, technological dependency, or societal collapse. The historical evidence supports non-intervention. Historical evidence. Thor repeated. Sub-Commander, the Asgard have protected younger civilizations for 10,000 years. We have witnessed the consequences of intervention and non-intervention across thousands of worlds. There is no universal rule that applies to every situation. Each crisis requires individual assessment. That is the problem precisely. Vlas stated. Individual assessment introduces bias, emotion, and subjective judgment. Objective principles prevent such complications. Hermione interjected, his tone clinically precise. Administrator, I have analyzed 17,000 documented cases of pre-warp civilizations facing extinction-level events across our galaxy's history. In 73% of cases where intervention occurred, the civilization survived and eventually achieved space travel. In 94% of non-intervention cases, the species went extinct. The mathematics favor action. Mathematics do not account for ethical implications. Vlas replied. Once you intervene in one civilization, where do you draw the line? Every species faces challenges. If the Asgard solve all problems for all pre-warped worlds, you create a galaxy of dependents, not equals. We don't solve all problems, Thor said quietly. We solve the problems they cannot solve themselves. The Coordinates lack the technology to stabilize their planet. They possess neither the scientific knowledge nor the industrial capacity to prevent this catastrophe. This is not a crisis of their making that they can resolve through cultural evolution. This is geology. Physics. Forces beyond their control. Archer stood, pacing the conference chamber. I've been listening to this debate, and I keep coming back to one question. What would we want someone to do if Earth faced the same situation? If our planet was dying and we couldn't stop it, would we want a more advanced civilization to stand by and watch us burn because of some philosophical principle? Captain, T'Pol said, your emotional response, while understandable, does not address the logical complications of intervention. Maybe logic isn't enough. Archer's frustration boiled over. Maybe sometimes you have to make a choice based on what's right, not what's logical. 400 million lives, T'Pol. Not statistics. Not philosophical abstractions. Living, breathing people who don't deserve to die because we're too scared to act. Fear is not the motivation for non-interference, Vlas stated coldly. Wisdom is. Shran's antennae curved forward aggressively. I hate to say this, but I agree with the pink skin. We're talking about genocide by inaction. The Andorian Empire was built by warriors who understood that strength comes with responsibility. If you have the power to prevent mass death and choose not to use it, you're complicit in that death. An interesting position from a species known for aggressive territorial expansion, Vlas observed. We expand territory, Vulcan. We don't exterminate populations and call it logic. Thor raised a hand, cutting through the escalating tension. This debate could continue indefinitely. I propose an alternative approach. Captain Archer, what would humanity do in this situation? Archer met Thor's alien gaze. We'd save them. Worry about the philosophical implications later. You can't debate ethics with ghosts. And Andoria, Commander Shran? Same answer. Act first, philosophize later. And Vulcan, Administrator Vlas? Vlas's expression hardened. We would observe, document, and learn from the tragedy. We would honor their memory by ensuring their fate educates future generations about the consequences of environmental mismanagement. Then we have reached an impasse, Thor stated. The Asgard must make our own decision. He turned to Hermione. Prepare the seismic regulators. We will begin deployment in 6 hours. Vlas stood abruptly. Commander Thor, if you proceed with this intervention, Vulcan will formally protest. We will not support this action. Your protest is noted, Administrator. However, the Asgard do not require Vulcan permission to act according to our own ethical standards. Thor's tone remained even, but carried unmistakable finality. We have protected civilizations for millennia. We will not abandon that responsibility because it creates philosophical discomfort. If anyone objects to saving lives, they'll have to go through us first. Archer nodded. Enterprise will help coordinate the operation. Someone needs to document this properly. T'Pol looked at her captain with something that might have been concern. Captain, Vulcan High Command will not approve. Then they can file a complaint with Starfleet. I'm done watching people die while we debate philosophy. Vlas's gaze swept the chamber. You are making a grave mistake. The consequences of this action will extend far beyond one world. Perhaps, Thor acknowledged. But the consequences of inaction are certain. 400 million deaths. That is a certainty I refuse to accept. The Vulcan administrator departed without another word, leaving an alliance born not from agreement, but from shared conviction that some principles transcend logic. In orbit above Corridan 3, the Asgard prepared to do what they had done for 10,000 years. Protect those who could not protect themselves. Whether it was wisdom or hubris remained to be seen. The seismic regulators descended through Corridan 3's atmosphere like falling stars, their Asgard cloaking technology rendering them invisible to the primitive sensors below. In the O'Neill's command center, Thor monitored the deployment with characteristic precision, while Hermione coordinated the technical aspects of an operation that would save a world without that world ever knowing it had been in danger. Regulator 7 is in position at the Pacific Tectonic Junction, Hermione reported. Regulator 12 approaching the Northern Continental Fault Line. All systems functioning within acceptable parameters. On Enterprise's bridge, Archer watched the operation unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and unease. They were doing the right thing, he was certain of that. But Vlas's warnings echoed in his mind. Where did intervention end? How many times could they justify breaking the rules before the rules became meaningless? Captain, Hoshi called from communications, her voice tight with urgency. I'm detecting subspace distortion at bearing 327 Mark IV. Multiple ships dropping out of warp. Archer's stomach dropped. Vulcans coming to stop us. Paula's fingers flew across her sensors. Negative, Captain. Configuration matches Romulan warbids. 3 vessels decloaking at extreme weapons range. Romulans? This far from the neutral zone? Tripp's voice carried from engineering. Captain, we're nowhere near Romulan space. Maybe they're not concerned about borders anymore. Archer hit his comm panel. Thor, we've got company. 3 Romulan warbids just appeared. I don't think they're here for the scenery. Thor's response was immediate. Asgard sensors detected their approach 47 seconds ago. They have been monitoring our operations since we entered the Corridan system. I calculate 73% probability they are here for our technology, not to enforce non-interference protocols. The view screen shifted to show the Romulan vessels, elegant, predatory birds of war painted in aggressive greens and grays. Archer had encountered Romulans before, always through intermediaries or brief, hostile exchanges. The species shared ancestry with Vulcans but had chosen a different path, one of conquest, deception, and ruthless pragmatism. A communication channel opened without being requested. The face that appeared was distinctly Vulcanoid, pointed ears, swept eyebrows, severe features. But where Vulcans projected stoic logic, this Romulan woman radiated cold calculation. Her uniform marked her as a commander, her eyes as someone who had killed before and would kill again. Unknown vessel, she stated in flawless Federation standard. I am Commander Tomalak of the Romulan Star Empire. You are in violation of territorial sovereignty. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. This system isn't Romulan territory, Archer shot back. And Corridan 3 is under our protection. Protection? Tomalak's expression didn't change, but her tone carried amusement. How noble! The primitive humans playing guardian to even more primitive species. And accompanied by vessels of unknown configuration deploying technology we've never encountered. Her gaze sharpened. Technology the Romulan Star Empire claims by right of superior force. On the Dakana, Shran's response was immediate. Romulan, this is Commander Shran of the Andorian Imperial Guard. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Withdraw while you still can. Outnumbered? I count 3 warbirds against 1 Andorian vessel, 1 human ship, and 1 unknown craft. Those are acceptable odds. Tomalak smiled, a predatory expression that held no warmth. Commander Shran, your reputation suggests intelligence. Surely you recognize that the unknown vessel represents technology worth acquiring. Technology that could shift the balance of power in this sector. Stand aside, and the Empire might overlook your interference. The Asgard are not technology to be acquired. Thor's voice cut through the channel with surprising force. We are a sovereign civilization with rights and agency. We will not submit to intimidation or theft. Tomalak's eyes widened slightly, the only sign of her surprise at hearing the alien voice. Asgard. An interesting designation. Our intelligence services will want to know more about you. She gestured off-screen. I'm detecting energy signatures consistent with the deployment of devices on the planet below. Cease your operations immediately. We are preventing a geological catastrophe, Thor stated. Our actions harm no one, except Romulan interests. The Corridan system sits at a strategic junction between multiple territories. A stable Corridan means potential future competition. An unstable Corridan means an exploitable vacuum. Tomalak's tone remained clinical. Your intervention disrupts carefully calculated projections. That cannot be permitted. Archer felt his blood run cold. You want them to die. You want an entire civilization to collapse so you can move into their territory. I want what serves the Empire, Tomalak replied. Sentiment is for lesser species. Now, unknown vessel, Asgard, you will surrender your technology or we will take it from your wreckage. You have 30 seconds to comply. The channel closed. Battle stations. Archer barked. Trip, give me everything the engines have. Hoshi, get me aligned to Thor. Already connected, Captain. Hoshi replied, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Commander, those warbirds are more advanced than anything we've got. Archer said quickly. Can your shields withstand their weapons? Asgard defensive systems are considerably more sophisticated than Romulan plasma torpedoes. Thor replied. However, we are still adapting to this universe's physics. Shield efficiency is currently at 87% optimal capacity. Additionally, we cannot defend ourselves while simultaneously maintaining the seismic deployment operation. Diverting power from the regulators would doom Corridan 3. Shran's voice cut in. Then the Dakana and Enterprise run interference while you finish the job. Thor, how long until deployment is complete? 11 minutes 43 seconds. Then we hold for 12 minutes. Jonathan, are you with me? Archer looked at T'Pol, saw the concern in her eyes but also the resolve. Looked at Trip's station, saw his engineer already rerouting power to weapons and shields. Looked at the young crew around him. Hoshi at communications, Mayweather at the helm, Reed at tactical, all watching him for the decision that might get them killed. We're with you, Shran. Reed, target their weapons systems. Don't fire unless they do, but be ready. Aye, Captain. Phase cannons armed. Torpedoes loaded. On the tactical display, the Romulan warbirds broke formation, spreading into an attack pattern that would allow them to concentrate fire from multiple vectors. Archer had studied Romulan tactics at Starfleet Academy, limited information from brief encounters and intelligence reports. They favored overwhelming force, psychological warfare, and ruthless efficiency. The lead warbird fired. Green plasma torpedoes streaked across space, their trajectory calculated with mathematical precision. Enterprise shuddered as shields absorbed the impact, systems whining in protest as the hull plating struggled to dissipate energy it wasn't designed to handle. "Shields down to 74%, Reed called out. "Hull plating holding but barely. Return fire! All phase cannons!" Enterprise's blue-white beams lanced out, striking the Romulan shields with satisfying impacts that lit up the view screen. The Doctrine joined the fight, Andorian weapons flashing as Shran maneuvered with aggressive precision. But 3 warbids against 2 smaller vessels. The mathematics were brutal. "Thor," Archer said, gripping his chair as another impact rocked the ship. "I hope you work fast. 10 minutes, 16 seconds remaining, Captain. We will complete our mission. The Asgard do not abandon those under our protection." Below them, invisible to the dying civilization, seismic regulators continued their work. Above them, ships exchanged fire in a battle that would decide whether saving one world was worth the price being paid. The Romulan warbids moved with the coordinated precision of pack hunters, their plasma torpedoes painting space in violent green. Enterprise rolled hard to starboard, narrowly avoiding a salvo that would have overwhelmed her shields, while the Doctrine returned fire with Andorian particle cannons that carved bright streaks across the enemy's defenses. "Hull plating critical on deck C!" Tripp shouted from engineering. "We can't take many more hits like that." Archer watched the tactical display as the warbids repositioned for another attack run. They were being outmaneuvered, outgunned, and slowly worn down. "Thor, status on the deployment?" 8 minutes, 41 seconds, came the Asgard's maddeningly calm response. "I recommend you concentrate defensive efforts on protecting this vessel rather than engaging the Romulans directly. Our shields can withstand significantly more punishment than yours." "Easy for you to say," Shran growled over the calm. "You're not the one getting shot at by 3 warbids. Jonathan, we need to change tactics or we'll be debris before those regulators finish their work." Paula's fingers moved rapidly across her console. "Captain, I'm detecting a pattern in the Romulan attack vectors. They're concentrating fire on our vessels while avoiding direct engagement with the O'Neill. They want the Asgard technology intact. Which means they won't destroy Thor's ship," Archer said, a plan forming. "But they'll be happy to blow us apart to get to it." He opened a channel. "Thor, can you extend your shields around Enterprise and the Doctrine?" "Negative, Captain. Shield harmonics are incompatible with your vessel's structural frequencies. Attempting to extend our shields would create catastrophic resonance feedback in your hull plating." Another impact. Enterprise shuddered violently, and somewhere below, Archer heard the sound of systems failing. "Starboard plasma conduit rupture," Tripp reported. "I'm venting it to space, but we're losing power fast." On the view screen, Commander Tomalak's warbird swung around for another pass, flanked by her 2 escort vessels. They weren't even bothering with evasive maneuvers. They knew their prey was wounded. Then space itself seemed to shimmer. A brilliant white light materialized between the Romulan warbids and their targets. When it faded, another vessel hung in the void. Larger than the O'Neill, its design carrying the unmistakable elegance and mathematical precision of Asgard engineering. "This is Supreme Commander Agar of the Asgard vessel Daniel Jackson," a new voice announced. "Commander Thor, we detected your distress beacon through the dimensional rift and managed to follow your quantum signature. Your status?" Thor's response carried something that might have been relief. "Supreme Commander, your arrival is fortuitous. We are completing a planetary stabilization mission while under attack by hostile local forces. 7 minutes, 19 seconds until deployment completion." "Understood. Defensive posture authorized. All vessels stand clear." The Daniel Jackson's weapons ports, previously invisible in its seamless hull, suddenly glowed with harsh blue-white light. Energy beams lanced out with surgical precision, not striking the Romulan ships directly but instead creating brilliant energy barriers between them and their targets. Tomalak's face reappeared on the view screen, her controlled expression now showing cracks of genuine concern. Unknown vessel, you are interfering with Romulan military operations. This is an act of war. This is an act of defense. Agar replied, his tone carrying the same measured authority as Thor's. The Asgard do not initiate hostilities. However, we will not permit aggression against those under our protection. Withdraw your vessels, and no further conflict is necessary. The Empire does not retreat from inferior forces. Then allow me to demonstrate why we are not inferior. The Daniel Jackson's weapons fired again, not at the warbids, but at the space around them. The energy beams wove intricate patterns, creating what looked like a cage of pure light that enclosed all three Romulan vessels. When Tomalak's warbird tried to maneuver, it struck the barrier and recoiled, systems overloading from the energy feedback. Fascinating, T'Pol murmured. They've created a containment field using directed energy weapons. The precision required to maintain that configuration while compensating for ship movement is extraordinary. Shran's antennae curved forward with appreciation. I take back every doubt I had about these Asgard. That's beautiful. Inside her command chair, Tomalak made calculations with ruthless efficiency. 3 warbids trapped in an energy cage by technology she never encountered. Unknown forces with capabilities beyond her intelligence reports. The mission parameters had changed. This isn't over, she stated coldly. The Romulan Star Empire will remember this interference. We will study you. Learn your weaknesses. And when we return, you will not find us so easy to contain. We look forward to the challenge, Agar replied. Now withdraw, or I will demonstrate what Asgard weapons can do when we stop being defensive. The energy cage flickered, creating a corridor back toward Romulan space. Tomalak held Archer's gaze for a long moment, her expression promising future retribution. Then her image vanished as the warbids engaged their impulse engines and fled through the opening. Archer let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Stand down from battle stations. Damage report. Hull plating at 43%. Trip called out. Starboard plasma conduit destroyed. Port EPS manifold compromised. We're going to need a weakened space dock to fix all this, but we're still flying. Dockana status? Archer asked. Shran appeared on screen, his blue face showing satisfaction despite visible damage to his bridge. We'll survive. Lost 2 particle cannon arrays and our forward shield emitter, but nothing critical. Your Asgard friends certainly know how to make an entrance, Jonathan. Thor, Archer said. Thank you. And please convey our gratitude to Commander Agar. If he hadn't arrived when he did. The gratitude is mutual, Captain. Without your defense of our operation, we could not have completed our mission. Thor's holographic image appeared, standing beside another Asgard who must have been Agar. The final seismic regulator is now in position. Activation sequence commencing. On the view screen, Corridan 3 rotated peacefully, unaware of the battle fought in its orbit or the technology now embedded deep in its crust. Hermiad's voice provided commentary as the regulators activated, their combined energy fields creating a stabilizing matrix throughout the planet's tectonic structure. Seismic activity decreasing, Hermiad reported. Volcanic pressure dissipating. Tectonic stress redistributing to safe levels. The Corridan 3 planetary core is now stable. Projected atmospheric recovery will begin within 6 months. T'Pol studied her sensors. Commander Thor, the regulator's energy signatures are fading. Will the Corridanites be able to detect them? Negative. The devices will remain dormant unless seismic activity exceeds critical thresholds again, which our projections suggest will not occur for approximately 15,000 years. To the Corridanites, their geological crisis will simply stop. They will develop theories, perhaps attributed to divine intervention or natural cycles. But they will never know the truth. Archer watched the planet turn, imagining the billions of lives continuing below, children being born, cities being built, a civilization that would survive to eventually reach the stars on their own terms. Was it worth it? He asked quietly. The battle, the damage, violating the Vulcan protocols? 400 million lives saved, Thor replied. A civilization preserved. The opportunity for an entire species to achieve its potential rather than perish from geological catastrophes. Captain Archer, I have protected civilizations for millennia. This question never becomes easier. But my answer remains the same, yes. It was worth it. Ager's voice carried thoughtful consideration. Though Commander Thor, we should discuss the diplomatic complications your actions have created. The Vulcans will be displeased. The Romulans are now aware of Asgard's presence in this universe. And you have established a precedent for intervention that may have far-reaching consequences. All accurate assessments, Thor acknowledged. However, the Asgard have never chosen the easy path when principles are at stake. We will face the consequences as we always have, together, and with integrity. In the depths of space, the Romulan warbirds retreated toward their empire, carrying sensor data and tactical analysis that would be studied, dissected, and weaponized. On Corridan 3, a civilization continued its slow evolution toward the stars, never knowing how close they had come to extinction. And in orbit above them, an alliance born from shared conviction prepared for the storm they knew was coming. The Vulcan High Command Chamber on Vulcan was a testament to austere logic, geometric precision in every angle, muted colors designed to minimize emotional stimulation, and at its center, a semicircular table where 7 administrators sat in judgment. Administrator Vlas occupied the central position, his expression carved from stone as he reviewed the reports from the Corridan incident. Thor stood before them, alone. He had refused the offers of support from Archer and Shran, insisting that the Asgard would answer for their own decisions. Behind him, holographic displays showed sensor recordings of the battle, the seismic regulator deployment, and most damning, the 400 million Corridanite life signs that continued to register on planetary scans. You were warned, Vlas stated, his voice echoing in the chamber's acoustically perfect space. You were explicitly informed that intervention in pre-warp civilizations violates the fundamental principles of interstellar conduct. You proceeded anyway. Correct, Thor replied. The Asgard made an informed decision to prioritize life over protocol. Protocol exists for logical reasons, Commander Thor. You have set a dangerous precedent. How many other civilizations will now expect salvation from their problems? How many will cease striving for their own solutions, knowing that advanced species will intervene? The Corridanites do not know we intervened. Thor countered. There is no dependency, no cultural contamination, no awareness that external forces acted. They will develop naturally, believing they survived through their own resilience or fortune. Administrator T'Pau, the eldest member of the council, leaned forward. Her age showed in weathered features, but her eyes remained sharp. Ignorance of intervention does not negate the intervention itself. You have altered their timeline, Commander. You have chosen which civilizations deserve to survive and which do not. This is the hubris of gods, not the wisdom of explorers. With respect, Administrator, the Asgard do not claim godhood. We claim responsibility. We possess the capability to prevent mass extinction. We chose to use that capability. If that is hubris, then I accept the accusation. And what of the Romulans? Another administrator, TL's, gestured to the tactical recordings. Your actions have drawn aggressive attention to this region of space. The Romulan Star Empire now knows of Asgard technology, and will seek to acquire it by any means necessary. You have endangered countless worlds in your attempt to save one. The Romulans were already monitoring the Corridan system. Kermiad's voice interjected from the holographic display. He attended remotely from the O'Neill. Our intervention did not create Romulan interest. It merely revealed what was already occurring in the shadows. Perhaps that transparency serves a greater good. Perhaps? Vlas's tone carried cold disapproval. You gamble with the security of this entire sector based on perhaps? Thor remained motionless, his large black eyes reflecting the harsh lighting. Administrator Vlas, I have a question for the High Command. In 10,000 years of Vulcan civilization, how many times have you encountered a situation where you possessed the power to prevent genocide but chose not to act? And of those times, how many do you look back on with satisfaction that you maintained your principles? The silence in the chamber was absolute. T'Pau spoke slowly. There have been such situations. Logic dictated non-interference. We honored that logic. And how many beings died while you honored that logic? An irrelevant question. Vlas snapped. Emotional appeal does not change logical conclusions. Does it not? Thor stepped closer to the council table. Administrators, I have studied Vulcan history during my time in your system. You were not always a logical people. Once you were consumed by emotion, violent, passionate, nearly destroying yourselves in planetary warfare. It was Zurich who showed you another path. Logic. Restraint. Control. Your point? T.L.'s asked. My point is that Vulcan logic is not universal truth. It is a cultural choice born from specific historical trauma. A choice that serves you well. But the Asgard come from a different history. We nearly destroyed ourselves not through emotion, but through the opposite, cold, calculating genetic manipulation that seemed logical at the time. We thought we could improve upon nature through science. We were wrong. Thor gestured to himself. Look at me, administrators. I am the result of 11,000 years of cloning. Each iteration slightly more degraded than the last. My people face extinction because we were too logical. Too willing to sacrifice the messy chaos of natural reproduction for the sterile perfection of controlled duplication. We learn that sometimes logic fails. Sometimes the heart, the irrational impulse to preserve life, must guide action. Vlas stood. So you would replace logic with emotion? Chaos with impulse? No. I would balance them. The Asgard learned this from the humans we protected, the Tauri of our universe. They showed us that wisdom comes not from choosing logic over emotion or emotion over logic, but from knowing when each is appropriate. Logic told us the Coordinates' extinction was inevitable. Compassion told us to try anyway. We chose compassion. And they live. At what cost? T'Pau asked, her tone less hostile than before. Commander Thor, we understand your intentions. But intentions do not determine outcomes. The Romulans now view this region as containing exploitable technology. Other species may learn of your intervention and demand similar assistance. The precedent you have established creates instability. Stability bought through inaction while millions die is not stability, Thor replied. It is complicity dressed as principle. The council members exchanged glances, silent communication through minute expressions that spoke volumes in Vulcan culture. You will not accept our judgment, Vlas stated. No matter what we decide, the Asgard will continue operating according to your own moral framework. We will operate according to Asgard principles, yes. As is our right as a sovereign civilization. However, Thor paused, choosing his words carefully. We also recognize the value of Vulcan perspective. The High Command raises valid concerns about unintended consequences. The Asgard would benefit from Vulcan counsel, even if we do not always follow that counsel. You want our wisdom without our authority. T.L.'s observed. We want partnership between equals who disagree but respect each other's reasoning. The Asgard have made mistakes in our long history. Vulcan logic might have prevented some of those mistakes. Conversely, Vulcan non-intervention has costs that Asgard compassion might have mitigated. Neither approach is perfect. Perhaps together, we find better solutions than either civilization could alone. T'Pau stood slowly, her ancient frame moving with dignified purpose. You speak well, Commander Thor. You acknowledge the validity of our concerns while maintaining your principles. This is unusual in first contact situations. She looked at her fellow administrators. I propose a compromise. Vlas's eyebrow rose fractionally. Continue. The Asgard have demonstrated both superior technology and questionable judgment. They require oversight not to control their actions but to provide perspective they may lack. Conversely, the Asgard possess capabilities that could serve the greater good if applied wisely. I propose a joint council. Asgard, Vulcan, and human representation, to evaluate potential intervention scenarios before action is taken. A committee? Thor's tone carried something that might have been amusement. Administrator, the Asgard High Council already serves that function for our own species. A committee that includes non-Asgard voices, T'Pol clarified. You claim to value perspective. Prove it by accepting counsel before acting, not merely tolerating criticism afterward. Thor was silent for several seconds, an eternity for Asgard processing speeds. Your proposal has merit. However, the Asgard will not surrender operational autonomy. If the Joint Council cannot reach consensus, we reserve the right to act according to our own judgment. As do the Vulcans, Vlas stated. We will not endorse actions we find logically unsound, regardless of majority opinion. And humanity? T'Pol asked. Captain Archer supported your intervention. Will he continue to do so when the consequences become clear? I will speak for myself, Administrator. Every head turned. Jonathan Archer stood in the chamber entrance, having arrived unannounced. Beside him, Paula's expression suggested she had not approved this interruption but had been unable to prevent it. Captain Archer, Vlas said coldly. This is a closed session. Then open it. This affects Earth as much as Vulcan. Archer walked forward, taking position beside Thor. I heard the proposal. A joint council to evaluate intervention decisions. Earth wants representation on that council. Humanity lacks the experience, Vlas began. Humanity lacks the baggage, Archer interrupted. Vulcans see every situation through the lens of their own violent past. The Asgard see everything through the lens of their genetic crisis and millennia as protectors. Earth sees situations fresh, without centuries of predetermined assumptions. Maybe that's exactly what this council needs. T'Pol's lips curved in what might have been the ghost of a smile. The human argues with the passion his species is known for. Yet his logic is not entirely without merit. She looked at Vlas. Administrator? Vlas was silent for a long moment. Very well. A joint council. 3 representatives from each civilization, Asgard, Vulcan, and Earth. Decisions require majority consensus, but individual civilizations retain autonomy to act independently if they accept full responsibility for consequences. Agreed, Thor said immediately. Agreed, Archer echoed. Then we have reached an accord, T'Pol stated. The Corridan intervention will stand without further protest. But Commander Thor, the next time you contemplate saving a civilization, you will consult with this council first. Is that acceptable? Thor's large eyes met hers. It is acceptable, Administrator. Though I hope the council proves capable of making decisions quickly. Geological catastrophes rarely wait for committee consensus. Then we will learn to deliberate efficiently, T'Pol replied. Dismissed. As Thor and Archer left the chamber, the human glanced at his alien companion. Think this council will actually work? Unknown, Thor admitted. But it is preferable to operating in isolation. The Asgard have been alone too long, Captain. Perhaps cooperation with younger civilizations will provide the perspective we need to survive our genetic crisis. And maybe humanity will learn some wisdom from species who've been exploring the stars since we were living in caves. Optimistic assessment, Captain. Hope, Commander. Remember? Sometimes it achieves what logic can't. Behind them, the Vulcan High Command began the difficult work of balancing principles with pragmatism, knowing that the galaxy had just become far more complicated. 6 weeks after the Corridan incident, the Joint Council convened for the first time aboard a neutral station, a small Vulcan outpost on the edge of explored space, equidistant from Earth, Vulcan, and the location where the O'Neill maintained its research operations. The chamber was sparse but functional. 3 chairs for each delegation, a circular table that implied equality, and view screens displaying real-time data from across the sector. Thor sat with Hermiad and Supreme Commander Asgard, who had elected to remain in this universe to assist his stranded colleague. Vlas represented Vulcan alongside T'Pol and Science Director Tmur. Captain Archer attended with T'Pol and Ambassador Soval, the Vulcan diplomat to Earth who had reluctantly accepted humanity's inclusion in this unprecedented arrangement. Item 1. T'Pol announced, calling the session to order. Status update on Asgard adaptation to this universe's physical constants. Commander Thor? Hermiad activated a holographic display showing complex genetic and technological data. Dimensional incompatibility continues to degrade Asgard cloning stability at accelerated rates. However, collaborative research with Vulcan Science Directorate has yielded promising results. By adapting our cloning technology to account for this universe's quantum variance, we have reduced degradation acceleration from 30% to 12%. Still unacceptable for long-term survival, Tmur noted, but significant progress. Agreed, Thor said. The Asgard appreciate Vulcan's scientific assistance. In exchange, we have provided technical specifications for our shield harmonics and sensor technology. The technology transfer appears equitable. Asgard added. Additionally, we have established a permanent research facility in the asteroid belt of an uninhabited system. This allows us to conduct genetic research without violating territorial sovereignty while maintaining proximity for council participation. And the dimensional rift? Archer asked. Any progress on getting you home? Minimal, Asgard admitted. The subspace corridor that brought us here collapsed completely. Recreating it would require energy expenditures beyond our current capacity and understanding of this universe's physics. For the foreseeable future, the Asgard are residents of this reality, not visitors. A heavy silence settled over the chamber. Vlas spoke carefully. This raises jurisdictional questions. As permanent residents, the Asgard must acknowledge local governance structures and territorial boundaries. Your status as an extra-dimensional civilization provided certain diplomatic flexibility. That flexibility may no longer apply. We acknowledge no governance but our own, Thor stated firmly. However, we recognize the wisdom of cooperation with local powers. The Asgard have no territorial ambitions. We require only sufficient space for research and the freedom to operate according to our ethical principles. Which brings us to item 2. T'Pol said. Romulan activity has increased along the neutral zone. Intelligence suggests they are intensifying efforts to acquire Asgard technology. 3 incidents in the past month involved Romulan operatives attempting to infiltrate research facilities and intercept communications. Ambassador Soval, his aged features carved with diplomatic precision, leaned forward. The Romulan Star Empire views the Asgard as both threat and opportunity. Your technology could shift the balance of power in this sector. They will not cease their acquisition attempts through polite means. Then they will learn the consequences of attempted theft, Asgard stated. The Asgard do not tolerate aggression against our vessels or personnel. And if Romulan aggression escalates to open conflict? Vlas asked. Will the Asgard expect Vulcan or Earth support in a war you provoked by your intervention at Corridan? Archer bristled. Nobody provoked anything. The Romulans were already operating in that system. Thor's intervention just forced them to reveal themselves. Semantics, Captain? The result remains unchanged. Increased Romulan hostility and a potential conflict that could destabilize the entire sector. T'Pol interjected with characteristic logic. Administrator, analysis of Romulan historical patterns suggests they were preparing for territorial expansion regardless of Asgard presence. The Corridan system occupies a strategic position that the Empire has coveted for decades. Conflict was statistically inevitable. The Asgard intervention merely altered the timeline, not the outcome. An accurate assessment. Thor agreed. Though it does not resolve the question of mutual defense. The Asgard do not require military assistance against Romulan forces. However, a formal alliance would signal to the Empire that aggression against any member of this council invites collective response. You propose a military alliance? Soval's tone carried deep skepticism. Earth and Vulcan have maintained careful neutrality in regional conflicts. A formal alliance with an extra-dimensional power could obligate us to conflicts beyond our strategic interests. Not a military alliance. T'Pau corrected. A mutual defense pact. Limited in scope to protection of member territories and research facilities. No obligation to participate in offensive operations or conflicts initiated by individual members. Archer considered this. A defensive agreement makes sense. The Romulans need to know that attacking any of us means facing all of us. That's basic deterrence theory. It is also a significant departure from Vulcan foreign policy. Glass noted. We have avoided formal alliances that could entangle us in external conflicts. Perhaps that policy requires re-evaluation, Tmur suggested quietly. The galaxy is changing, Administrator. New powers emerge. Old threats evolve. Isolation may no longer serve Vulcan interests as effectively as it once did. The debate continued for another hour, careful parsing of treaty language, discussion of mutual obligations, analysis of strategic implications. Finally, T'Pau called for a vote. All in favor of a limited mutual defense pact between Asgard, Vulcan, and Earth civilizations? Thor, Hermiad, and Aga raised their hands immediately. After a moment, Archer, T'Pau, and reluctantly, Soval followed. The Vulcan delegation exchanged glances before T'Pau and Tmur raised their hands. Lass sat motionless for several seconds, then slowly lifted his hand. The motion carries, T'Pau announced. We will draft formal treaty language for ratification by our respective governing bodies. Item 3. Lass continued, clearly eager to move past the alliance discussion. Commander Shran has submitted a request for Asgard technological assistance in developing improved sensor arrays for the Andorian Imperial Guard. The High Command views this as potentially destabilizing to regional power balance. Archer grinned. Shran doesn't waste time, does he? Thor tilted his head. Commander Shran has demonstrated both courage and integrity. The Andorian Empire would be a valuable addition to this council. Absolutely not, Glass stated. Andorian military aggression is well documented. Providing them with advanced technology would create an arms race. As opposed to Vulcan maintaining technological superiority? Archer challenged. Seems like you're just worried about losing your advantage. We are concerned about stability, Captain. Vulcan's technological leadership has maintained peace in this sector for decades. Enforced peace through implied threat isn't really peace, Administrator. The argument escalated until T'Pau raised her hand for silence. This matter requires further discussion. We will table it for the next session. However, the Council should acknowledge that expansion of membership may become necessary as we formalize our relationships with other regional powers. As the session continued through various technical and diplomatic items, Hermiad worked quietly on his data pad, analyzing genetic samples collected from voluntary Vulcan and human donors. The research was slow, painstaking, and often frustrating. But patterns were emerging. Genetic diversity strategies that the Asgard had abandoned millennia ago, chromosomal repair mechanisms that natural evolution had developed over millions of years. Perhaps there was hope after all. Hours later, as the session concluded, Archer found Thor standing before the station's observation window, staring at the stars beyond. You're a long way from home, Commander. Farther than you can imagine, Captain. Not merely spatial distance, but dimensional separation. My universe continues without us. Our people face extinction, and we cannot even warn them or offer assistance. But you're doing something about it here, Archer said. This council, the research, the alliances, you're building something new. Or delaying the inevitable. Thor's reflection in the window showed an alien face that somehow conveyed profound weariness. The Asgard have existed for tens of thousands of years. We have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. We have accumulated more knowledge than your species can imagine. And yet we are dying. All our wisdom, all our technology, cannot save us from our own mistakes. Maybe that's why you're here, Archer suggested. Maybe getting pulled into our universe wasn't an accident. Maybe you needed to meet civilizations that are still learning, still making mistakes, still figuring things out. We don't have your knowledge, but we have something you might have lost. Hope, Thor said quietly. Yes, you have mentioned this concept before. Not just hope. Humility. The Asgard are incredibly advanced, but you're so focused on your own solutions that you might be missing alternatives. Working with us, with Vulcans, humans, maybe even Andorians, forces you to see problems differently. A logical assessment. Thor turned from the window. Captain Archer, I have a question. Your species is barely capable of Warp 5 travel. You have no advanced weapons, no sophisticated shields, no genetic mastery. Yet you challenged 3 Romulan warbods to protect our operation at Corridan. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. An insufficient answer. Many things are right that beings choose not to do. What specifically motivated your risk-taking? Archer thought about it. Because we've been where you are. Not facing extinction, but feeling powerless. For 50 years, the Vulcans have been telling us we're not ready, not advanced enough, too emotional to be trusted with serious responsibility. We've had to prove ourselves over and over. When I saw you standing up to Vlas, refusing to submit to their authority, choosing to help the Cordanites despite the risk. He smiled. I recognized that fight. And I wasn't about to let you face it alone. Thor studied him with those enormous black eyes. You saw a kindred spirit in beings who do not even share your biology? I saw someone doing what they believed was right, regardless of the cost. Yeah, I'd say that makes us kindred spirits. For the first time since arriving in this universe, Thor felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Genuine connection across the vast gulf of species difference. Captain Archer, the Asgard chose well when we decided to trust humanity. I suspect your species will surprise the galaxy in years to come. We're working on it, Commander. One day at a time. Outside the station, stars burned with ancient light, illuminating a galaxy that had just become infinitely more complicated, and infinitely more interesting. 3 months after the Joint Council's formation, the Asgard research facility in the asteroid belt hummed with activity that would have been unthinkable in either universe separately. Vulcan scientists worked alongside Asgard geneticists, their logical precision complementing millennia of accumulated knowledge. Human researchers, less experienced but unburdened by predetermined assumptions, asked questions that neither ancient civilization had considered. And in the center of it all, Thor watched genetic sequences align in patterns that suggested the impossible might become possible. Promising, Hermione announced, studying holographic DNA strands that incorporated elements from 3 different species. The human genetic repair mechanism, when adapted through Vulcan chromosomal structure and integrated with Asgard cloning technology, shows a 47% reduction in degradation markers. 47% is not 100%, Thor noted. But it is significantly better than extinction. Tmur approached, her Vulcan features showing the closest thing to excitement her species permitted. Commander, if we can refine this process further, the Asgard might achieve sustainable cloning within a decade. Perhaps 2. Time we may not have, Thor replied. But time enough to try. On Enterprise, Captain Archer reviewed reports from Starfleet Command with Trip Tucker leaning over his shoulder. The Asgard Alliance had created ripples throughout human space, some positive, many concerned. Admiral Forrest wants a full briefing on Asgard defensive capabilities, Trip said. And Starfleet Engineering is practically begging for access to their beaming technology. Tell them what we've told them before. The Asgard share knowledge as partners, not vendors. If Starfleet wants their technology, they need to contribute to the research. Archer signed off on the report. How's our own science team doing with the shield harmonics Thor provided? Making progress, but it's slow going. Their technology operates on principles we're still trying to understand. T'Pol estimates we're 5 years from practical implementation, maybe 10 before we can integrate it into new ship designs. 5 years ago, we were still arguing about whether to build the NX-01. Archer mused. Now we're working with extra-dimensional aliens on technology that makes Vulcan shields look primitive. Strange how fast things change. On Vulcan, Administrator Vlas stood in the High Command chamber, reviewing intelligence reports that troubled him deeply. The Romulans had intensified their technological acquisition efforts. 3 attempted infiltrations of the Asgard research facility. 2 intercepted communications suggesting the Empire was developing countermeasures to Asgard beaming technology. And most concerning, evidence that the Romulans were conducting their own dimensional research, possibly attempting to access the same subspace anomalies that had brought the Asgard to this universe. They are learning too quickly, Vlas stated to T'Pol, who had remained after the other administrators departed. The Asgard presence has accelerated technological development across multiple civilizations. This was precisely the destabilization I warned against. Destabilization, yes, T'Pol agreed. But also opportunity. The Romulans were always a threat, Administrator. Now we have allies with capabilities that can counter that threat. The Andorians are pressing for council membership, which would further strengthen our collective security. Even the Tellarites have expressed interest in diplomatic contact with the Asgard. You speak of federation, Vlas said quietly. I speak of cooperation between sovereign powers facing common challenges. Whether that eventually becomes formal federation remains to be seen. T'Pol's ancient eyes held steady certainty. But the galaxy is changing, Vlas. We can resist that change and become irrelevant, or we can help shape it according to principles we value. Which serves Vulcan interests more effectively? Vlas had no answer to that question. In the Asgard research facility, Thor stood before a holographic display showing the current status of their genetic research. 47% improvement was significant, but the Asgard had been dying for so long that even this breakthrough felt simultaneously miraculous and insufficient. Commander, Ager's voice interrupted his thoughts. We have received a communication from the Asgard High Council. They detected our continued subspace transmissions and managed to establish brief contact through the dimensional barrier. Thor turned sharply. Our people? Dying, as we knew they would be. But, Ager's expression conveyed something remarkable. They want to know about our research. About the genetic diversity we've encountered in this universe. They're asking if we found anything that might help. Show them everything. Thor commanded immediately. All our research data, all our collaborative findings with Vulcan and human scientists. If there's even a possibility our work here could save our universe's Asgard. Already transmitted, Commander? And they sent something in return. Ager pulled up a new holographic display. Specifications for a dimensional stabilization device. Theoretical, not yet built, but if it works, we could go home, Thor finished quietly. Or establish permanent communication between universes. Share research. Perhaps even facilitate limited transit of personnel and materials. Ager's tone carried cautious optimism. Commander, we might not have to choose between this universe and our own. We might be able to help both. Thor studied the specifications, his advanced mind processing implications faster than any human could comprehend. The device was possible, difficult, resource-intensive, requiring cooperation from multiple civilizations, but possible. Begin preliminary design work, he ordered. But Ager, do not prioritize this over our genetic research. The Asgard in our universe may have years left. The Asgard here, in this reality, face immediate degradation. We help ourselves first, then we help our dimensional counterparts. Understood, Commander. Alone again, Thor returned to the observation window that had become his favorite meditation point. Outside, the asteroid field drifted in perpetual silence, and beyond it, stars that were familiar yet fundamentally different from the ones he'd known his entire life. The Asgard had spent 10,000 years as protectors, guardians of younger civilizations who needed their wisdom and strength. But here, in this universe, they had discovered something unexpected. They needed protection too. Not military defense, but the kind of salvation that came from fresh perspectives, diverse thinking, and the stubborn optimism of species who refused to accept inevitable endings. Humans called it hope. Vulcans might call it illogical persistence. The Asgard were learning to call it survival. When Supreme Commander Thor had investigated that subspace anomaly, he had expected scientific data, perhaps evidence of temporal manipulation, maybe a diplomatic incident requiring resolution. Instead, he had found an entire universe, a reality where the Federation didn't yet exist but was being born through cooperation between unlikely allies. Where humans were still learning to walk among the stars. Where Vulcans were slowly understanding that logic alone couldn't solve every problem. Where the Asgard, ancient and dying, discovered they still had something to teach and far more to learn. The Joint Council would meet again next week. There would be arguments about Andorian membership, debates over technology sharing protocols, and endless diplomatic complications. The Romulans would continue probing for weaknesses. Political factions within each civilization would question the wisdom of these unprecedented alliances. But something fundamental had shifted. 3 civilizations from different corners of reality. One ancient and dying, one old and logical, one young and passionate, had chosen cooperation over isolation. They had chosen to face an uncertain future together rather than perish separately. Whether that choice would save the Asgard from extinction remained uncertain. Whether it would lead to formal federation remained to be seen. Whether the galaxy would accept these changes or resist them violently was still undetermined. But for the first time in millennia, Thor felt something he had thought lost forever to his species, genuine curiosity about what tomorrow might bring. The Asgard had always known how their story would end. Now, in this strange new universe, they had the opportunity to write a different ending. Perhaps even a hopeful one. Live long and prosper. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting story. Thank you for watching.